He woke up before the sun, as he always did. The small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. For a few seconds, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the day settle on his chest. Then he turned his head toward the bedroom door, listening for any sound from his child's room. Nothing yet. He slipped out of bed and moved carefully across the cold floor. The mirror in the hallway caught his reflection. Broad shoulders, faint lines around his eyes, a face that looked older than his age. Not because of time, but because of responsibility. In the kitchen, he started the kettle and packed a small lunch. Peanut butter sandwich, sliced apple, a handwritten note folded neatly into the corner of the lunchbox. He did this every day, not because he had to, but because he wanted his child to feel that someone was always there. By the time the sun began to rise, his child shuffled into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes half closed. He smiled immediately. No matter how tired he was, that smile made something inside him steady. They ate breakfast together at the small table by the window. He asked about homework, spelling tests, playground drama. He listened closely, nodding, sometimes laughing softly. To the outside world, he was just another tired single father trying to get by. But to that child, he was everything. After the school drop-off, he didn't go home to rest. Instead, he drove across town to a worn-out training field behind an old community center. The place was usually empty in the mornings. That was why he liked it. He opened the trunk of his car and pulled out a duffel bag. Inside were old running shoes, a jump rope, and a pair of worn training gloves. He tied his shoes slowly, tightening the laces with focus. For years, he had pushed aside his own dreams. When his wife passed away suddenly, everything changed. He had once planned to join the police academy straight out of his early security job. He had trained for it, prepared for it, but life had other plans. A child needed him more than a badge did. So he stayed. He worked long night shifts in private security. He took overtime whenever it was offered. He learned how to cook, braid hair, help with math homework. He became both mother and father. But the dream never fully left him. At night, after putting his child to bed, he would sometimes sit quietly with a notebook. He would read about physical tests, study training routines, watch old academy drills online, not to escape his life, but to build something for their future. And now, years later, he had finally applied. The police tryouts were open to the public this year. It was competitive. Hundreds had signed up. Most were younger, fresh out of college, athletic, confident. Some had been preparing their whole lives for this. He knew what people would see when they looked at him. A man in his late 30s, a single dad, a security guard, someone who missed his prime. He began running laps around the field. Slow at first, then faster. His breathing stayed steady. His movements were controlled. He wasn't training to impress anyone. He was training to endure. A few days later, the morning of the official tryouts arrived. The training facility was buzzing with energy. Groups of recruits stood in clusters, stretching, laughing, comparing workout routines. Many wore brand new gear. Some filmed short videos for social media. There was excitement in the air, mixed with nerves. He parked his older car at the edge of the lot and stepped out quietly. He wore simple athletic clothes. Nothing flashy, just practical. As he walked toward the registration table, he felt eyes on him. Not openly hostile, just curious. He signed in, clipped his number to his shirt, and moved to the warm-up area. That was when the whispers began. Is he here to watch? Maybe he's a trainer. No way he's trying out. He heard it all. Years of working night shifts had sharpened his awareness. But he didn't react. He kept stretching, rolling his shoulders, focusing on his breathing. A group of younger recruits nearby were doing push-ups in perfect rhythm. One of them stood out immediately. Tall, muscular, confident in the way he carried himself. The others looked up to him. He laughed loudly, slapped backs, gave advice like he was already wearing the uniform. The confident recruit noticed him eventually. Their eyes met for a brief second. The younger man gave a small, almost amused smile before turning back to his group. Warm-ups began. Trainers barked instructions. The recruits lined up. The first test was a timed run. When the whistle blew, everyone took off fast. Too fast. The younger ones sprinted ahead like it was a race for pride. He stayed behind, keeping his pace controlled. Years of experience had taught him something simple. Starting strong meant nothing if you couldn't finish stronger. Halfway through, he began passing a few runners who had burned out early. His breathing remained steady, his form clean. He wasn't the fastest, but he was consistent. When he crossed the finish line, he didn't collapse or celebrate. He simply walked to the side and took a sip of water. The confident recruit had finished near the top. He glanced over again, surprised to see the older man finishing not far behind. Obstacle courses came next. Walls to climb, tires to flip, sandbags to carry. The younger recruits attacked each task aggressively. Some struggled with technique but made up for it with speed. When his turn came at the climbing wall, a few quiet chuckles rose behind him. Careful, don't pull a muscle. He ignored it. He placed his hands carefully, testing grip and balance before lifting himself upward. His movements were efficient. No wasted energy. He reached the top smoothly and dropped down with control. A trainer raised an eyebrow, taking notes. But not everything went perfectly. On the tire flip, he slipped once. The heavy rubber rolled back slightly. A short laugh burst from somewhere in the crowd. He steadied himself and adjusted his stance. On the second try, he flipped it cleanly and continued. Embarrassment warmed his face for a moment, but he didn't let it linger. He had faced harder things in life than a crowd laughing. Between tests, he sat alone on a bench, stretching his legs. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. School would end in a few hours. If he finished early enough, he could still make pickup. He thought about the first time his child asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. "You're already grown up," the child had said. He had laughed softly. "I know, but people can still chase dreams, even when they're older." That memory pushed him forward. The final event of the morning was a demonstration sparring round. Controlled, supervised, meant to test reflexes and discipline. Pairs were assigned randomly. When his number was called, he stepped forward. The other number announced belonged to the confident recruit. A low murmur passed through the group. The younger man walked toward the mat with a grin, bouncing lightly on his feet. "No hard feelings," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "I'll keep it gentle." A few recruits laughed. He stepped onto the mat quietly and adjusted his gloves. His face showed no anger, just calm. The trainer explained the rules. Light contact, control, technique over force. As they squared up, the confident recruit leaned slightly closer. "You sure you're ready for this?" He didn't respond. He simply nodded once. Around them, the other recruits formed a circle. Some curious, some amused. For a brief second, a small doubt flickered in his mind. Not about his ability, but about how easily people dismissed him. How quickly they judged based on age, on circumstance. Then the whistle blew, and everything became quiet inside his head. The noise of the crowd faded. The whispers disappeared. Years of training, discipline, and silent practice rose to the surface. The confident recruit stepped forward with energy, certain of the outcome. And the single father waited, balanced, patient, ready. The next few seconds would change how everyone on that field saw him. But for now, in that opening moment, he stood as he always had in life. Underestimated, calm, and carrying far more strength than anyone could see. The confident recruit lunged forward first, moving fast and aggressive, as if he had already won before the sparring even began. His smile was cocky, and the others around the mat could barely hide their laughter. The single father didn't flinch. He stayed rooted, his eyes focused, his body relaxed but ready. Every instinct, every movement he had practiced over years, was coming together in that single moment. The younger man threw the first jab, quick and sharp, aiming to unbalance him. The father barely moved. He let the jab pass, using the slightest shift of his shoulders to absorb the motion, keeping his stance solid. The confident recruit's eyes narrowed for a second. He had expected resistance, but not this. "You should have stayed home, old man," the younger man taunted, his voice loud enough for others to hear. The crowd chuckled, some whispering, some shaking their heads at the seeming mismatch. He didn't respond. He had learned long ago that words were distractions, and distractions could cost you everything. The sparring continued. The confident recruit tried a combination of punches, quick and practiced. He moved with speed, relying on strength and confidence. But the father moved differently. His motions were precise, economical, and controlled. He didn't strike back yet. He waited, reading the younger man's rhythm, waiting for the right moment. The onlookers leaned forward. Some were still whispering about how this fight would end in a humiliating defeat for the older man. Others were just curious. Nobody had expected him to even make it to this round. The confident recruit stepped in again, throwing a high kick aimed at the father's side. He expected the older man to stumble or at least move defensively. But with a quiet calm, the father shifted his weight slightly, stepping just enough to avoid contact without breaking his balance. It looked effortless. "You're slowing me down," the younger man said, frustrated, and tried another move. A quick sweep aimed to knock the father off his feet. The crowd gasped. Some trainers whispered to each other, raising their eyebrows. This was not a typical match. Most people his age would have been overwhelmed already. But he didn't panic. He used the momentum of the sweep against the younger man, just a small movement redirecting it, making the top recruit stumble slightly forward. Not enough to fall, but enough to disrupt his balance. The father's calm eyes never left him. 3 seconds, someone whispered nearby, joking to another recruit. They didn't know he wasn't joking at all. The father had already calculated what he would do, practiced it in his mind countless times after putting his child to bed late at night. Years of quiet preparation had led to this precise moment. The confident recruit lunged again, aiming to capitalize on his earlier minor success. But the father saw it coming. With one swift, controlled motion, he shifted his weight, grabbed the younger man's arm, and used his momentum to bring him down to the mat in a controlled maneuver. The mat made a soft thud. Silence fell. The confident recruit lay there for a second, stunned. Not hurt, but unable to believe what had just happened. 3 seconds. That was all it took. The single father had neutralized the recruit in a move so clean and precise that it left everyone around the mat speechless. Some of the younger recruits whispered among themselves, stunned. The trainers were silent, writing down notes, eyes wide. Nobody expected this. Nobody had seen it coming. He stepped back immediately, raising his hands in a neutral gesture, showing there was no anger, no aggression beyond what the rules allowed. He offered a hand to the top recruit, helping him up. The younger man hesitated, then took it, still trying to process what had just happened. "You how?" he stammered, still breathing hard. The father only shook his head slightly, giving a calm smile. "Years of practice," he said simply. Nothing more. No boasting, no explanation. Just the quiet truth. Around them, the energy shifted. The whispers of mockery turned into quiet murmurs of respect. People who had laughed before were now watching with a new curiosity. Some nodded to each other, impressed not just by the physical skill, but by the calm confidence that radiated from him. The top recruit took a step back, brushing himself off, looking at the father in a new light. There was a mix of embarrassment and respect in his eyes. He had assumed he was facing an easy target, someone who couldn't possibly match his skill or confidence. And he had been proven wrong in an instant. The father walked off the mat calmly, moving to the side where he could stretch and catch his breath. He didn't need anyone's approval. He didn't need anyone's praise. But the acknowledgement in the room made a quiet warmth spread through him. For years, he had worked hard in silence. Now, a small part of the world was beginning to see it. The trainers called the next pair to the mat, but many of the recruits remained quiet, glancing back at him occasionally. Even the confident recruit avoided eye contact, focused on steadying himself. Something about the older man had changed the mood. He wasn't the same recruit they had expected to compete against. He was steady, strong, disciplined. and most of all, unshakable. Between rounds, the father sat quietly on a bench, stretching his legs and adjusting his gloves. He didn't need to talk. He didn't need to explain. But the whispers around him continued. Some recruits whispered about his technique. Others whispered about his age and how they had underestimated him. A few trainers exchanged brief words, clearly impressed by what they had just witnessed. The confident recruit, meanwhile, went to a corner to collect himself. His ego had been bruised. He had been the one everyone expected to shine, and in just a few seconds he had been humbled. He couldn't deny the skill and precision of the single father. It was humbling. It was a lesson in respect. The father looked around the gym quietly. He noticed the younger recruits stretching, comparing notes, talking about what had just happened. Some tried to replay the move in their minds. They whispered among themselves, realizing that experience, calmness, and careful technique sometimes mattered more than raw speed or strength. As the next round of sparring began, he was called back to the mat. Another recruit stepped forward, younger and confident, though not as arrogant as the first. The father nodded once, just to acknowledge the rules, and readied himself. This time, the match was different. The younger recruit was cautious, having watched what had just happened. They circled each other carefully, testing moves lightly. The father moved with precision, careful to maintain control, ensuring that every motion was measured. He wasn't trying to dominate. He was showing discipline, focus, and the quiet power that came from years of preparation. The crowd around the mat was attentive now. Everyone wanted to see how he would perform. Some younger recruits whispered, still in disbelief about the first sparring. Trainers took notes more carefully this time, clearly impressed with the consistency and control. The single father's face remained calm, almost serene. He was focused not on proving himself, but on doing his best, demonstrating that years of quiet preparation and life experience could not be measured by age alone. After a few exchanges, the match ended with a clear demonstration of skill on both sides. The younger recruit nodded respectfully, realizing he had learned something valuable. The father stepped back again, not boastful, just present, calm and composed. He returned to the bench, stretching again, catching his breath. Around him, the energy in the room had shifted completely. The laughter and whispers of mockery had vanished, replaced with quiet admiration. Even the confident recruit, who had mocked him before, now avoided eye contact, clearly processing the unexpected lesson he had just received. Throughout the day, each test that followed showed more of the father's discipline, endurance, and quiet skill. He moved through obstacle courses with controlled precision. His timing in drills was impeccable. Even in moments where others struggled or faltered, he remained steady, calm, and focused. Other recruits began to watch him differently, not as an older man who didn't belong, but as someone who had quietly honed his skills, someone who carried himself with experience and care. A few younger recruits whispered to each other about the importance of patience and focus. They realized that speed and strength were only part of the equation. By the time lunch break arrived, the father had earned a quiet respect that no one had anticipated. Trainers made notes, quietly nodding to each other. Other recruits gave him space, watching from a distance, curious and cautious. The once confident top recruit sat silently, reflecting on what had happened, understanding now that arrogance and youth were not enough to guarantee victory. As he sat on the bench, catching his breath and drinking water, he thought briefly about his child. About the quiet nights of practice, the sacrifices, the long hours of discipline that had led to this day. None of it had been easy. None of it had been glamorous. But every moment had mattered. Every late night, every early morning, every small decision to keep pushing forward had built to this moment of respect and recognition. He didn't need to boast. He didn't need applause. The quiet pride in himself and the knowledge that he had shown skill, calm, and discipline in front of others was enough. It was enough for him, and in the end, it was enough to make a difference in the way everyone in that room would see him from that point forward. The afternoon tests loomed ahead, but he was ready. Whatever came next, he knew he could face it with the same calm, quiet determination that had carried him this far. He was underestimated, yes, Mocked, yes. But he had turned the moment into something powerful. Something that could not be ignored. Something that would not be forgotten. And with that thought, he stood up, adjusted his gloves, and prepared to face the next challenge. The moment had come. The single father stood on the mat, gloves on, heart steady but alert. Across from him, the confident recruit bounced lightly on his feet, smirking at anyone who was watching. He had not forgotten the earlier round, but arrogance still filled him. He believed experience alone could not match youthful strength. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The trainer blew the whistle, signaling the start of the sparring round. The younger man lunged first, moving fast and with the energy of someone certain of victory. His first punch was sharp, aimed at the father's chest, designed to knock him off balance. The father didn't flinch. He had faced far greater challenges in life than a single jab. His eyes were calm, his body relaxed but ready. He let the punch slide past, shifting just enough to absorb its force without losing control. Around the mat, recruits whispered. Some thought this would be over quickly. Others leaned forward, sensing something different about the older man. He moved with a rhythm that was deliberate, each motion purposeful, not wasted. The confident recruit tried another strike, faster this time, throwing a combination that he hoped would overwhelm him. But the father read it. He moved fluidly, adjusting stance and weight, redirecting the energy in a way that made the younger man stumble slightly. Not enough to hurt him, but enough to disrupt his rhythm. "Come on, old man," the recruit taunted. "You're too slow for this." The father didn't answer. He had learned long ago that words were distractions. Words could make people lose focus. He let the younger man's arrogance speak for itself. All that mattered now was timing and control. The confident recruit attempted a high kick, aiming for the father's side. He had trained for speed, for precision, for moments like this. But the father had trained longer in life and in quiet practice. He shifted his body just enough, avoiding the kick, keeping his balance steady. Every movement was calm, measured, perfect. For a brief second, the younger man's confidence wavered. He had expected an easy match. This wasn't supposed to be difficult. He had underestimated him. Around the mat, trainers exchanged glances. The younger recruits watched with wide eyes, unable to believe the skill they were witnessing. The father wasn't just holding his ground. He was controlling it. Then came the decisive moment. The confident recruit lunged forward, moving aggressively, believing he could end it quickly. The father had been waiting, watching the pattern, the rhythm, the energy. Everything he had learned, every quiet night of practice after his child had gone to bed, led to this instant. In one swift, controlled motion, he used the younger man's momentum against him. He grabbed the arm, shifted his weight, and executed a technique so clean, so precise, that the top recruit was brought to the mat in under 3 seconds. Silence fell. The entire training room froze. No one had expected it. The thud of the body hitting the mat echoed, and for a moment, it felt like time had slowed. The younger man lay stunned, breathing hard, not hurt, but completely caught off guard. He had been defeated before he even realized what had happened. The father stepped back immediately, raising his hands in a neutral gesture. There was no anger, no aggression, only calm. He extended his hand to help the younger man up. The recruit hesitated, shocked, then took it. A mix of embarrassment and respect crossed his face. He had thought this would be simple. He had thought age and experience would be no match for speed and confidence. He had been wrong. Around them, recruits whispered, stunned. Trainers looked on, impressed, taking notes and nodding subtly. Even the recruits who had mocked the father earlier were silent, realizing that appearances could be deceiving. The older man had shown skill, calm, and control in a way that no one in that room had anticipated. "Years of practice," the father said quietly, almost to himself as he adjusted his gloves. He didn't need to boast. The calm confidence he carried said more than words ever could. The top recruit got up, brushing himself off, trying to mask his surprise. "I didn't see that coming," he admitted quietly, not meeting the father's eyes. He had learned something important in those 3 seconds. Humility, respect, the realization that youth and arrogance could never fully replace experience and discipline. The father walked to the side, catching his breath, stretching lightly, preparing for the next round. He didn't need praise. He didn't need applause. The quiet satisfaction of knowing he had performed with skill and control was enough. Yet he could feel the shift in energy around him. The room had changed. People were looking at him differently now. Other recruits began to whisper among themselves. Some tried to recreate the move in their minds. They realized that discipline, patience, and calm control mattered as much as raw strength. Even the confident recruit, who had mocked him before, avoided confrontation for a moment, reflecting on what had just occurred. The trainers called the next pair to the mat. The father sat on the bench, adjusting his gloves, watching. His focus remained steady. He had no need to prove anything further. But the recognition from the room was undeniable. The confident recruit went to a corner, quietly collecting himself. He had been humbled, not just physically but mentally. For the first time that day, he realized that his assumptions about others could be wrong. He realized that skill, experience, and composure could outweigh arrogance, speed, and strength. The father's mind, however, was already ahead. He thought about what had come before. The long nights of practice after his child was asleep, the years of balancing work and parenting, the sacrifices he had made. This moment on the mat, while brief, was the result of countless small decisions made in silence. The next rounds came and went. Other recruits were careful when paired with him, having watched the 3-second moment closely. They moved more cautiously, tested their technique carefully, and showed him respect he had not asked for but had earned. Each round was a demonstration not just of strength, but of discipline, control, and presence of mind. During a brief break, he drank water and sat quietly, stretching his legs. A few trainers came by, giving him subtle nods. They didn't need to say much. The respect was in their eyes. The other recruits had noticed as well. They watched quietly, realizing that experience and composure carried weight beyond the physical abilities they had assumed mattered most. As the afternoon progressed, the father's consistency and calm focus continued to impress. Every test, every drill, every sparring match showcased not only physical skill but also mental strength. The quiet determination that had carried him through life now carried him through this challenge. The confident recruit, who had been humbled, now observed from the side. His earlier arrogance had vanished. Instead, there was a newfound respect. He had learned a lesson he wouldn't forget. Never underestimate someone based on age or circumstance. By the end of the day, the father had not just passed the sparring test. He had earned something more valuable: respect, recognition, validation of years of quiet preparation and persistence. He hadn't needed to shout, to boast, or to demand acknowledgement. It had come naturally, simply because he had been skilled, disciplined, and calm in the face of challenge. As he packed up his bag and prepared to leave, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Not from defeating the top recruit in 3 seconds, but from knowing that he had stayed true to himself. He had faced judgment, mockery, and doubt, and he had responded not with anger or pride, but with skill, patience, and integrity. The day had started with whispers, laughter, and doubt. It ended with silent respect, quiet acknowledgement, and a lesson that would remain with everyone who had witnessed it. Experience mattered. Discipline mattered. Calm, quiet strength mattered. And sometimes, in just 3 seconds, a person could change the way the world saw them. He stepped out of the training facility into the late afternoon sun. The day was warm, but he barely noticed. Thoughts of his child, waiting for him at home, brought a smile to his face. He had done what he had come to do. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for himself, and for the small life who depended on him. The 3 seconds had passed, but their impact would last far longer. They had proven a truth he had always known. Patience, practice, and calm confidence could achieve what arrogance, speed, and strength often could not. He walked to his car, tired but steady, ready to return home and continue the life he had built with quiet strength, determination, and love. He sat quietly on the bench, wiping sweat from his brow, and let the moment settle in. Around him, the other recruits moved to the next drills, but he remained calm, stretching slowly and methodically. He had finished the most intense part of the tryouts, and the memory of what had just happened, the 3-second moment that stunned everyone, still felt alive in his mind. But there was more to this story, more behind his calm strength than anyone there could see. Years ago, long before he became a single father, he had lived a life filled with structure and discipline. He had joined a specialized security team shortly after finishing school, drawn by the desire to protect others and serve his community in a quiet way. That experience had taught him more than he realized at the time. Hours of training in hand-to-hand combat, situational awareness, and strategy had built muscle memory that never left him. Each movement, each reaction had been practiced countless times until it became second nature. But life changed abruptly. His wife had passed away suddenly, leaving him to care for a child who was too young to understand the loss. The weight of that responsibility fell entirely on him. He set aside his dreams of joining law enforcement formally. He didn't have the luxury of time or energy for academy courses or full-time training. Every night, every early morning, every decision was about making sure his child had stability, safety, and love. Yet the skills he had learned never disappeared. They rested quietly inside him, like a dormant power waiting for the right moment. After putting his child to bed, he would sometimes clear the small living room of furniture and practice drills, quietly repeating sequences he had learned years ago. He never bragged about it. He never shared these secret sessions with anyone. They were for him to maintain readiness, to keep discipline alive, to remind himself that he still had something to give beyond parenting. Friends and neighbors only saw him as a devoted father and hard worker. He worked long hours at security jobs, sometimes night shifts, sometimes overtime, balancing life in a way that left little room for personal dreams. Most days he felt invisible. People assumed he was just another man trying to get by. They didn't see the quiet strength, the training, the hours of practice that had sharpened his reflexes and built endurance. Even when he began preparing for the police tryouts, he did so cautiously. He didn't want anyone to see him as desperate or seeking attention. He trained in small moments, before work, after work, late at night when the world was silent. He reviewed obstacle courses online, practiced drills in his living room, and ran laps around the park before dawn. Each effort was deliberate, slow, and consistent. He wasn't trying to be flashy. He was trying to be ready. As he looked around the training facility, he noticed the younger recruits. They moved with confidence, with speed, and with bravado. But many of them lacked control. They relied on strength and energy, thinking it was enough. He had seen this before, people who had skill but not patience. People who could move fast, but not with precision. People who could act boldly, but not with calm understanding. He remembered the confident recruit lying on the mat just moments ago. That young man had been strong and fast, but he had not considered the value of experience and composure. 3 seconds had been enough to show the difference. He didn't feel proud or superior. He felt quiet satisfaction. He had used what he knew, what he had trained for silently, to maintain control and ensure safety. There was no need for boasting. The act itself spoke volumes. A trainer approached him quietly, clipboard in hand, observing his calm demeanor. "You've had experience before, haven't you?" the trainer asked. Not aggressively, but with curiosity. The father nodded slightly. "Some," he said. "Security work. Training. Years ago." The trainer didn't press further. He understood. Experience doesn't need explanation. It reveals itself in action, and the father had already proven that. While the younger recruits took their next drills seriously, he remained methodical. Each move, each step, each turn was calculated. He moved with a balance between strength and precision, awareness and control. He thought about what had brought him here, not just the dream of becoming a police officer, but the hope that he could show his child that determination, discipline, and quiet perseverance mattered. That even when life challenges you, you can find a way to stand strong. He remembered the nights sitting at his child's small desk, helping with homework, correcting spelling mistakes, teaching math. Every night, he would tuck the child in, brush hair from the forehead, and kiss a cheek. Then he would quietly train, sometimes practicing punches or techniques in the living room, careful not to disturb anyone. The walls of their small apartment had absorbed the sound of his effort. It was all invisible, quiet, but powerful. A flashback came to him one of the first nights after his wife passed. He had sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted, wondering how he would manage. The child had crawled into his lap, small hands clutching his shirt, and had said softly, "You're my whole world." That moment had defined him. He realized he could be strong, not just for himself, but for someone else. That strength had shaped every decision since. Now, at the training facility, all of that invisible work and determination had manifested in what everyone had witnessed. The 3-second sparring had been a culmination of years of preparation, sacrifice, and quiet persistence. Every young recruit, every mocking glance, every whisper of doubt had been met with patience and skill. He had not just performed, he had set an example of what true discipline looks like. The confident recruit, still on the side, had begun to recover from his shock. He had learned something invaluable, not just about physical skill but about character. The father's calmness, humility, and precision had shown that strength was more than muscle. It was focus, patience, and the will to act with care and control. Between rounds, the father continued to observe, stretching lightly, thinking about what came next. He didn't need to prove anything further, but he wanted to continue showing that experience and calm determination mattered. Each drill, each obstacle, each sparring round was an opportunity to demonstrate that preparation, discipline, and quiet strength could overcome arrogance and speed. He remembered the small moments that had prepared him for this day. Waking up before dawn to run laps, practicing techniques silently at night, balancing work and parenting without complaint, teaching lessons not just to his child, but to himself about persistence, patience, and resilience. None of it had been easy, but every step had mattered. Every small act of discipline had brought him to this moment. As the day wore on, the energy in the room shifted further. Other recruits began to respect him without words. Some tried to mirror his movements, practicing more deliberately, trying to understand the calm control he demonstrated. Trainers quietly nodded, recognizing that this wasn't just skill. It was life experience made visible. He thought about his child again, imagining the pride in those small eyes, the sense of security in knowing that the parent they relied on had strength beyond what anyone could see. That thought gave him a quiet smile. Everything he had done, everything he had sacrificed had been worth it. Even the confident recruit, now quieter and more reflective, approached the father at a pause in drills. I didn't know," he admitted softly. "You're really skilled. I underestimated you." The father nodded. No arrogance, no ego. "Experience doesn't always show itself immediately," he said simply. "It's quiet, but it matters." The younger man nodded, and for the first time that day he seemed to understand. Strength wasn't just about speed or youth. It was about patience, discipline, and control. It was about knowing when to act and how to act with precision. The father returned to his corner, taking a deep breath. The rest of the tryouts continued, but the atmosphere had changed. People no longer whispered mockery. They whispered respect, curiosity, and quiet admiration. What had seemed like an ordinary day at a training facility had become a lesson in humility and the power of preparation. For the father, it wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about being ready when the moment came, about showing that years of quiet effort, silent practice, and disciplined living had real value. He thought about his child, about the small life he carried on his shoulders, and felt a quiet warmth. Every sacrifice, every long night, every moment of doubt had led to this day. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need applause. The respect in the eyes around him, the acknowledgement from the trainers, and the lesson given to the younger recruits was enough. The strength that had been invisible for so long was now visible, not just in skill but in character. As the final drills of the day approached, he felt a quiet pride. Not for himself, but for the journey he had taken to reach this moment. The journey of a single father who had faced loss, responsibility, and doubt, yet remained disciplined, prepared, and calm. The journey of a man who had quietly built strength that could not be measured by appearances alone. And as he prepared to take on the remaining challenges, he knew that whatever happened next, he had already shown something important. That experience, discipline, and quiet strength could change the way the world saw a person. Not with noise or arrogance, but with calm, steady action and unwavering focus. The day had been long, intense, and filled with challenges, yet he felt calm. Each test, each obstacle, and each sparring round had passed, and he had performed with steady focus. Around him, the energy in the training facility had shifted completely. The younger recruits were no longer whispering mockery or laughing behind his back. They moved with respect, glancing at him occasionally, trying to learn from the calm, precise way he carried himself. Even the confident recruit who had mocked him earlier remained silent, thoughtful, and cautious. Now came the final phase of the tryouts, the comprehensive evaluation. It wasn't just about strength or speed anymore. The trainers would observe discipline, decision-making, focus, and composure under pressure. For him, this was the true test because life had already prepared him for it. Years of balancing responsibilities, making tough choices, and staying calm in chaotic situations had given him an edge that no youthful energy could replace. As he walked to the designated area, he noticed some of the younger recruits looking nervous. They had watched his performance all day, seen his skill in action, and understood that they were up against someone different. Not just stronger or more experienced, but someone who carried himself with a presence that demanded quiet attention. The trainer overseeing the evaluation explained the tasks. There would be simulations, scenarios, and a few surprise challenges designed to test reaction time, judgment, and composure. The father listened carefully, nodding slightly. He didn't need reminders of how to handle pressure. He had lived under pressure every day of the past several years. He simply absorbed the instructions and focused on the tasks ahead. The first scenario involved a simulated emergency. A loud alarm sounded, and recruits were required to respond to a staged incident, demonstrating calm, decisive action. Many younger recruits rushed forward, moving quickly but without thought, making minor mistakes that cost them points. He moved deliberately, assessing the scene in an instant, prioritizing the actions that would have the greatest effect. Every motion was controlled, every decision calculated. The trainers took notes, impressed with his ability to remain composed while others panicked slightly. He didn't rush, but he didn't hesitate either. Efficiency, control, and experience guided him, and it showed in every movement. The younger recruits glanced at him in surprise. They realized that speed alone could not achieve the results they had hoped for. Calm and precise action was equally important. Next came a series of physical challenges. Obstacle courses designed to test endurance, strength, and agility. Many of the younger recruits sprinted, trying to finish first, only to stumble or falter because of haste. He moved steadily, his breathing even, pacing himself perfectly. Walls were climbed with control, ropes were scaled efficiently, and every obstacle was completed without wasted motion. It wasn't just physical skill that set him apart. Trainers watched closely as he communicated with other recruits during partner tasks, showing leadership without arrogance. He guided calmly when needed, offered encouragement when appropriate, and never sought praise for his efforts. His demeanor reflected someone who understood teamwork, responsibility, and the subtle ways leadership manifests. After several hours of drills, the trainers called for the final sparring assessments. This was the moment when the remaining recruits would face him, individually, in controlled one-on-one exercises. Many of them approached with a hint of nervousness, remembering the 3-second moment that had stunned the room earlier. The father welcomed the challenge quietly. He wasn't there to intimidate. He was there to perform to the best of his ability, with discipline and control. Each sparring session played out similarly. The younger recruits attacked with speed and strength, but he moved with calm precision, redirecting momentum, maintaining balance, and demonstrating skill without aggression. He never needed to dominate or humiliate. Instead, he controlled the situation with quiet authority, earning nods of respect from trainers and even silent admiration from the recruits themselves. By late afternoon, the evaluations were complete. The trainers called all the recruits together for a debrief. There was an air of anticipation in the room. Some younger recruits were anxious, others curious. All eyes, subtly or not, were drawn to the father who had quietly moved through the day with consistent excellence. The head trainer began speaking, reviewing the day's observations. He praised the recruits for effort and determination, but he paused as he addressed the father specifically. "Your performance today was exceptional," he said. "You demonstrated skill, composure, and leadership that stood out at every stage. You didn't just complete the tasks. You excelled through discipline and focus." A quiet murmur spread through the group. Some younger recruits glanced at each other, acknowledging the truth of the statement. The father simply nodded, accepting the recognition without display of ego. He had expected nothing less, but hearing it aloud reinforced the quiet pride he felt inside. One by one, trainers gave feedback to the recruits. The confident recruit, who had mocked him earlier, stepped forward. His posture was more respectful, his expression thoughtful. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I see now how much experience and control matter. I apologize for my arrogance." The father offered a small smile, simple and genuine. "It's okay," he said softly. "We all have things to learn." The room was silent for a moment. The energy had shifted completely from the morning. Respect, acknowledgement, and understanding replaced the earlier mockery and whispers. Everyone had learned a lesson, not just about physical ability, but about the value of patience, discipline, and life experience. When the final results were announced, the father had passed with strong marks across every evaluation. Trainers praised his calm control, leadership potential, and exceptional discipline. Others had performed well, but his consistent composure and skill throughout the day had set him apart. After the announcement, he gathered his things and stepped outside. The late afternoon sun warmed his face as he walked to his car. Thoughts of his child filled his mind. He imagined the small eyes looking up at him, the smile of pride and relief when he came home. All the effort, all the quiet practice, all the sacrifices, every long night and early morning had led to this moment. Driving home, he thought about the lessons he had imparted today, both to himself and to those who had watched him. He had shown that strength is not always loud, that skill is not always flashy, and that calm discipline can achieve results faster than brute force or arrogance. He had demonstrated that experience carries weight that cannot be measured by age alone. When he arrived at home, his child ran to meet him at the door. "Did you do it?" the small voice asked eagerly. He knelt down, hugging tightly. "Yes," he said softly. "I did it. And I showed people that patience, practice, and calm can make a real difference." The child's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," he said, smiling. "Really?" He unpacked his bag slowly, taking a moment to relax. The quiet apartment, once filled with the stress of preparation and effort, now felt like a place of calm accomplishment. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The loss, the responsibility, the endless hours of work, and the quiet dedication that had kept him moving forward. He reflected on the day's events, the moments of doubt, the whispers of others, and the 3 seconds that had changed the perception of everyone around him. He didn't feel pride in the way some might expect. He felt quiet satisfaction. He had done what he needed to do, demonstrated his skill, and upheld his values. Even the confident recruit, now sitting quietly in the corner, seemed to understand the lesson. Strength was more than speed or youth. Discipline, experience, and calm control could accomplish far more than arrogance alone. The father had shown that without a single boast, without a single word of aggression, he could earn respect and admiration through quiet action. He prepared dinner, checked homework, and spent time with his child, just as he had every day. But today felt different. There was a sense of completion, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal achievement. It was a demonstration that life experience, discipline, and steady effort mattered. That being underestimated did not define him. That quiet strength could change how the world saw him. As he tucked his child into bed, he thought about the future. There would be more challenges, more tests, more obstacles. But he felt ready. He had faced judgment, ridicule, and doubt, and he had responded with patience, skill, and integrity. Those qualities would continue to serve him well, not just in the academy but in life. He turned off the light, pausing at the doorway for a moment to watch the child sleep peacefully. A quiet smile touched his lips. Today had been a victory, not just for him, but for the small life who relied on him every day. He had shown that strength was not just physical but mental and emotional. That perseverance, quiet determination, and discipline mattered more than appearances. As he closed the door behind him and moved to his own small bedroom, he felt a sense of peace. The long day of trials, tests, and challenges had ended. The respect he had earned, the lessons he had demonstrated, and the pride he carried for his child were enough. He had shown that being underestimated could be turned into an opportunity to prove not just skill but character. In the quiet of the evening, he reflected one last time on the events of the day. He had faced doubt and mockery, performed under pressure, and emerged not just victorious, but respected. He had shown that calm determination, experience, and discipline could change perceptions and create lasting impact. And most importantly, he had done it all for the small life that depended on him, proving that quiet strength, love, and persistence can overcome any challenge. The father lay down to rest, tired but satisfied, knowing that he had accomplished something meaningful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he had earned something far greater than recognition or accolades. He had earned respect, proved his worth, and reinforced the quiet truth that patience, preparation, and unwavering dedication can triumph over doubt, arrogance, and misjudgment. And as he closed his eyes, he carried with him the certainty that the lessons of today, discipline, control, and quiet strength, would continue to guide him and inspire others for years to come.